coming up on this episode of the Roundtable.
Kamala recently said, if you're 18 to 24, what is distinctive about this age group? They're stupid. This is her speech the other day, in which she also praised putting criminals in jail. So her shamelessness, I think, will profit her in the sense that, well, in the same sense of the brat stuff, right? I mean, it's like, is it Heideggerian authenticity? Like, it doesn't even matter what the content is, as long as you're your true self. And Kamala, as you guys said, her true self is a completely unprincipled, just political weather vane. In that sense, she was a perfect running mate for Joe, although she's got a harder left edge to her, which will be hard to completely memory hole in the coming months. Welcome, everyone, once again to the Roundtable, the editors and publishers podcast of the American Mind of the Claremont Institute. I am the president of the Claremont Institute and publisher of the American Mind and the Claremont Review books, Ryan Williams, and I am joined by managing editor of the American Mind, Seth Barron, and special editor. Sorry, this is going to be a running gag on everyone's show.
Sparkle editor, Rainbow Sparkle editor.
No, Spencer. Brat editor. We'll get to that later.
Brat summer editor.
Spencer Clavin, and also associate editor of the Claremont Review books. Well, folks, we're here recording, as we always do, on a Wednesday, on July 24th. So there's only one thing to lead the podcast with, and that is Kamalapalooza. Kamala Harris, your esteemed soon-to-be, we think, Democratic nominee for president, Kamala Harris. She's come a long way from a humble origins as a prosecutor in California, then senator from California, one-time mistress of Willie Brown, a great generational talent, political talent, and I mean that unironically, in California, even though he worked for the Democrats, a very skilled politician, still with us. And she now has maneuvered herself, as I suspect she thought she might somehow when she accepted Joe Biden's request to become his running mate. She's almost at the top of the mountain, almost. I don't know if we'll spend too much time handicapping her chances of staying there. It looks pretty promising for her at the moment, with a whole rash of endorsements, including the Congressional Black Caucus, the whatever they call the progressives in the House, although not the squad, at least not in unison. And then a bunch of endorsements across a lot of governors who would like to be, I think, her vice presidential nominee, from Josh Shapiro to Gretchen Whitmer and others, to Hillary Clinton. Who knows what Hillary has up her sleeve? I'm sure if she could somehow finagle her way into the nomination, she would, but I doubt she'll be able to. Just a few sort of head notes as we start. Shock poll the other day from Reuters Ipsos. Kamala leads Trump 44-42 in a national head-to-head, although it was quickly pointed out that, as Reuters Ipsos often does, they were oversampling Democrats by 10, 12%. So, grains of salt, as always. The retcon is on. Axios was chiding people for calling Kamala Harris a border czar, when in fact, if you look, at least they've maybe scrubbed the other one, but in April of 2021, the following partial sentence appeared in Axios: Harris appointed by Biden as border czar. So a Mediaite headline was, Axios accuses GOP of fabricating Kamala Harris's border czar title, and then M- 3 years after reporting she was Biden's border czar. We've seen also, on the right, and this is not new, and people have been calling Kamala Harris a diversity hire for two reasons since she was picked, which was, Biden said, I will only I promise to choose a female as vice president. And then, James Clyburn saved Biden's bacon by delivering South Carolina. And the scuttlebutt, or behind the scenes at the time, was Biden had promised him a black female vice president. And so he made good on that too. It's kind of a version of, at least if you squint a tiny bit, it's not quite a straight line, but Mike Anton's famous, almost 3 years ago today, exactly, off by 3 days, column for the American Mind, that's not happening, and it's good that it is. Kamala was touted as having the virtues of her skin color and her genitalia, and then when we pointed out we're not allowed to, but it's nonetheless good. And then finally, another piece of the retcon is Kamala the Moderate. She's the former prosecutor, tough on crime, goes the line in the last 3 days. And this time she's dealing with the biggest criminal of all, Donald Trump. And then finally, we'll have Spencer talk a little bit about this because it's a bit beyond my wheelhouse. I won't speak for Seth, but this phenomenon of the last 3 days on TikTok, that is Kamala the Brat. So what to make of all of this, gentlemen?
Well, look, the thing about Kamala is there's a lot of things that one could say about her that are not very nice, but none of those things will help Trump defeat her. So I have this perspective that Trump needs to just stay like, I feel like something's happened to Trump, and maybe it was being dragged into court and being forced to sit there and watch Tish James smirk and have these like disgusting judges and prosecutors like just conspire to destroy him in all these different cases and ways. But I feel like the guy has he's become tempered, and he's a lot more restrained than we've seen him be in the last few cycles.
Yes.
And I think that's like incredibly important. There's a few things that he just must not talk about. One, Kamala's laugh. Two, Kamala's dating history. Three, her lack of like having that, the fact that she never birthed children. Four, that she just seems kind of loopy. And you know what? He's doing an amazing job. I mean, he doesn't really do what he used to do, which is just like crack off constantly about his opponents and come up with like, I guess he is calling her Crooked Kamala, but I think that's fair. I think it would be bad if he called her Cackling Kamala. He needs to just
that would be terrible. Please no, please no.
No. Look, that's exactly what they're waiting for him to do.
Yeah.
Or any reference to her being a DEI hire. The thing is she can't run away from her record. And she's an essential part of the Biden-Harris team. She owns all of their horrible policies and all of the terrible things that happened. She was border czar. I don't think that's like an actual, that's just a nickname. She was effectively the border czar. It doesn't matter if she says she wasn't. Well, all Trump has to do is and here's the main thing, he must not run to the left of her on crime by saying, oh, she put so many black people in jail. Like, from our perspective, we want to put criminals in jail. Like, so he just needs to focus on crime, showing that she's essentially a major reason why California has turned into a crime-infested, pit, and Oakland and San Francisco in particular, immigration and inflation. He just needs to stick completely to his point. And that, were you better off 4 years ago? He was president 4 years ago. So it's an easy thing to do. He doesn't have to get into any personal critiques or anything like that. He has a great path to victory if he just sticks to his message. Let her go on about how he's a felon and a sex abuser and how fun she is, and all of that. He can just keep doing what he's doing. He could basically just ignore her in terms of the personal side, which would be completely different from his usual mode, and just hit her on these issues. And I think it would be fantastic if he could do that. I do think, look, I don't want to go on and on, but for 8 years, I kind of feel like we've always sort of cringed a little bit when Trump would come out with one of his boners. And then we're sort of forced into this defensive role of having to excuse it or defend it or embrace it half willingly. And I feel like he's doing it's remarkable that the guy at 78 could change, but he does seem like he's got a different approach. And if he can just keep this up, it'll be phenomenal.
Totally. That's really good, Seth. I mean, I keep stressing this because I feel like weirdly we're prone to forget it. The man has just had a near-death experience, and that's different from an assassination attempt with all this media around it and an incredibly iconic set of images, and the kind of bigness of that as a historical moment is a separate thing from the human being, Donald Trump, who, whatever else you think about him in any direction, is a person who's just gone through like a thing that changes people, which is almost dying. And I do think it's actually transformed his demeanor. Like, that does feel impossible to believe, maybe because it's Trump and because of how rigidly set the tracks of this whole dispute have been for so long. But whatever it is, whether it's that or whether that only confirmed a strategy that he was already kind of adopting in the debate with Biden, we're looking at a different Trump. And it does seem like the right Trump, and we hope that it lasts. I got a little nervous at his convention speech as he started to wander kind of off the rails. The first part I thought was riveting. He gave this whole description of the shooting, and he kissed the uniform of the guy who died, defending his family. This was all very moving. And then he did kind of do like a low energy Trump rally. Felt like he was finding his footing a little bit. But I think, Seth, everything you said makes perfect sense. I'm haunted throughout this week by two things, both of which were said on the Roundtable or were part of the history of the Roundtable, both of them by people who are not here right now. One of which was James Poulos when Kamala was in the primaries, so running to be the nominee in 2020. And I was laughing at her and making some joke about what a hyena she is. And James just looked at me with the kind of hollowed out gaze of the Delphic oracle and said, "But Spencer, aren't you a little bit afraid of Kamala because of the way she embodies the pure robotic soullessness of the modern Democratic Party? In other words, because she's so unlikable, so devoid of principle, so empty of meaning as a candidate, or totally without charm and appeal. For that exact reason, she seems poetically just as the person who will now be elevated on the basis of zero merits, simply through the logic of the situation." And lo and behold, she then became totally improbably, I mean, we forget how absurd this was, but she then became the vice president of the United States. And it was exclusively for the reasons, Ryan, you alluded to. I mean, they did this with Ketanji Brown Jackson too. They were like, "We want a black woman." And then people said, "Isn't that a little racist?" And they were like, "How dare you suggest that this brilliant black woman was suggested for any reason other than her competency?" So that's the situation that we're dealing with Kamala. Now I'm, again, the specter of that moment with James is coming back now. And I do think that we in our conservative world are so repulsed by Kamala that we can't see the ways in which she does have a real shot. You know, she could win this thing, and Trump has to tread carefully. And I think the path you outlined for him, Seth, is the right one. The other thing that haunts me, which kind of weighs in the opposite direction, is Matt Peterson, who had a viral tweet back when he was on this podcast about his wife's reaction to Kamala during, I think, the debate with Mike Pence. And he said, "My wife just walked into the room, took one look at Kamala and said, 'I absolutely hate this woman,' and walked out." This was a huge moment for Matt on Twitter because all these people, women especially, started saying, "Yeah, I cannot." She's like nails on a chalkboard. I think that Kamala's deficiencies, her demeanor deficiencies, the bizarre way she comports herself in public, it will actually be best for us if, as you say, we say nothing about it and simply allow it to land, especially with women, as I suspect it probably will. It is this over-the-top kind of grotesque coquetry that she does. There's some weird sort of flirtatious thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even describing it, you start to sound like a dirty old man. It crawls right up your skin. So I absolutely think like letting that be in the way that he did with Biden's age, where it's like it was all implied. He had that one line that obviously was alluding to his dementia, but didn't actually call him demented or old. I think if he can fly on exactly that plane, then yeah, there's a great path here.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's perfect. He's just got to let her be her without anything he says about it will like raise the hackles of all the women of America. Right. And make them really defensive. But if they're allowed to just see the pure her, yeah. Right. I mean, don't forget she dropped out of the 2020 campaign in 2019.
Yeah.
Like, she's really bad.
She got no delegates. I mean, yeah, the Democrats don't like her. Nobody likes her. She's just, the minute she steps into the public eye, she plummets in everybody's opinion because she's a terrible person who comes across as a terrible person. And also, she's very awkward and inept in all these clips that are going around. You don't have to doctor them. You don't have to do anything to them. She just comes across as psychotic and deranged and also empty of all but the lust for power, which puts her on a plane also with Hillary, who had some of these same properties. Shall we just briefly do a brat explainer for our listeners, since unfortunately they're like liable to encounter it?
Yeah, I was going to say, Spencer, but there is a movement to turn all of these vices into a virtue. What's up with that?
Okay, so in this, now I will be delivering these explanations in my capacity as special needs editor of the American Mind, because this is really, I don't know, can we say on this podcast? This is so, I mean, okay, this stuff is so brain dead, but it's going to have a role to play. I'm actually already I'm out of my depth here, because it's really Gen Z and below that's really into this artist, Charlie XCX. There's a British invasion, next gen type performer. She's been around for a while. She's had other hit albums, but her latest, 2024, is called Brat. And I think I'm already just like so out of touch, but I think it emerged out of this hyper popular set that she did with Boiler Room, which is like a platform that kind of elevates underground performances and kind of like gets you these exclusive ins to particular places, performances, concerts in various cities around the world. Anyway, the album's trash. That's not just because I'm old. The album's really bad. But it's got this like attitude that is defined by the word brat, which is supposed to express a vibe that I do think is kind of running through the zeitgeist at the moment. It's very zeitgeisty, finger on the pulse type. It's not that you're such a terrible person. It's just that you're a little sassy. You don't really care how people regard you, and you're just gonna like go and dance at the club and have a good time. This is sort of like in the mold, I don't know, of like actually there was a song in it that I think is based on one of the Red Scare girls. So like it's not necessarily a left-wing thing, but they are now the weird sclerotic millennial media apparatus that exists to kind of like suck the juice out of all youth movements and turn them into mass-produced shells for politicians to wear, has now tried to pass off Kamala as a classic example of the brat spirit. So you get these little clips of her dancing, and you get her, I'm speaking moment from one of the debates, and all these like, it's a very, very strained attempt to package her as a kind of sassy youth candidate. And it's transparent, but transparent things kind of work sometimes, and this does seem to be taking over TikTok, further proving my suspicion that TikTok is basically run, shadow puppeted by Chinese operatives or whoever is in the good graces of Chinese operatives. You get like Kesha, I think, did a little quick TikTok about this. Like the whole thing is like really preposterous, but we will now get like months and months of media packages devoted to upholding, I think, this perception. And young people are stupid, as is evidenced by the fact that they like Brat. So maybe it'll work.
And the fact that Kamala recently said, if you're 18 to 24, what is distinctive about this age group? They're stupid. This is her speech the other day, in which she also praised putting criminals in jail. So her shamelessness, I think, will profit her in the sense that, well, in the same sense of the brat stuff, right? I mean, it's like, is it Heideggerian authenticity? Like, it doesn't even matter what the content is, as long as you're your true self. And Kamala, as you guys said, her true self is a completely unprincipled, just political weather vane. In that sense, she was a perfect running mate for Joe, although she's got a harder left edge to her, which will be hard to completely memory hole in the coming months.
What I find, I mean, Spencer, you totally nailed the whole brat thing, and this crazy psyop that just like burst out the other day after she was, anointed, through this weird kind of like palace coup as the new standard bearer. And then all of a sudden there was just, my favorite thing about it is you read a lot of people like professional Democrats, and they're all saying the same thing, which is the vibe has shifted. There's so much energy now. And it's so, I mean, it's pure like cope, I guess. This sense of like, okay, we're going to manifest our feelings by talking about how true they are. The energy is there. Do you feel it? Things are turning. Things are shifting. It's kind of the way like Maoists and communists always believe that they're just on the verge of the revolution really happening.
Speaking their intentions into existence. Well, this is like what you just said, Seth, kind of is what culture reporters especially have done. And there is this like weird symbiosis between culture reporters desperately in need of a significant cultural event to write about and political reporters desperately in need of some way to put lipstick on a pig, where they do sometimes like speak trends into existence. And there's so many layers to it here, because even that phrase vibe shift, people don't remember this, but there was some lengthy think piece in like, I don't know, it was The Cut or The Atlantic or one of these places. It was like, the vibe shift is now a thing, like the moment when vibes shift. And I just remember reading that and thinking like, hasn't vibe shift been a thing in people's group chats for like a year? But it was like, oh yes, I've discovered, like I've gone out like some sort of German researcher in the Antipodes and like excavated this, trendy new idea of the vibe shift. And so then like they made vibe shift into a thing in their own heads, and they think that this gives them the power to effect vibe shifts by thinking about things differently, which maybe at one time it did. But now it's like, they did it after the Trump speech. It was like, oh, we're back on track. Now that Trump has totally belly flopped at the Republican National Convention, the assassination attempt and the impending palace coup and the whole like collapse of the Democrat media apparatus, none of that matters anymore because Trump gave a sort of mediocre speech at the convention. Like that's, so this is like part and parcel of that. I just don't think, I think all of that is all the kind of trappings, all the Potemkin like drapery and scenery is just coming crashing to the ground right now. That's the real vibe shift, if there is one, is like after that assassination attempt, like the press was so grievously discredited by that people feel suddenly emboldened to just say like, this is all total horse manure, which it is. And I don't know.
Well, I'm sorry, Ryan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, my question is how long the boomlet lasts, and also how wide and deep it is, because we're talking about a lot of phenomenon just in the last 10 minutes of this podcast that are pretty online.
Yeah.
And I really not, and it's only July. I mean, in a way. So she could peak way too early, and it could be a peak that's mostly confined to TikTok and some of the more mendacious alleys of the mainstream media, MSNBC, et cetera. So, but the real brass tacks will be all the ads. We'll get to this, but the ads that they're going to run, she's just an endless Oppo research gold mine, going all the way back to her tenure in California. And I was actually reminded the other day, I don't know, it might even be a way of flipping the abortion thing on her, but probably the Trump campaign won't want to touch it. But remember, I want to say James Damore, but that's of course not correct. there were a couple of young reporters, but one in particular who exposed Planned Parenthood's baby part business, which is kind of grotesque. And Kamala was the AG that threw the book at them, including for exposing this. Having
Is
to
this
do
Project Veritas? She went after James.
No, it wasn't O'Keefe.
No?
It was
Okay.
it was a younger guy who I think may have been a Claremont McKenna graduate, but I might have that wrong, so don't quote me on it. But it was another sort of undercover journalistic thing, and that's what they hung around his neck for violating interview consent laws in California and that sort of thing. So, but anyway, it's just the Oppo file is just endless with her.
Oh, there's tons. And you know what? She's never really faced actually her AG race in California, I guess she almost lost to a Republican.
It's like 53-47 or something.
Yeah. But I think it was even closer. It was really, I was looking at the numbers. There's all kinds of things like this guy, Alexander Izagirre, some MS-13 guy whom she, he did some crime and then she let him go. She had some program to help undocumented illegal immigrants, and then he went and robbed and ran over some woman, and she never really took a lot of heat for that. And it's the type of thing where Trump mentioned it a long time ago, and it was called he's doing like Willie Horton tactics. What's funny about Willie Horton? Like they talk about that ad campaign, which I'm sure neither of you remember, but where Dukakis had let this rapist, this murderer out on a furlough, and then he went down to Maryland and raped and killed people. Yeah. And Bush made hay of it. And they all said, "Oh, this is so outrageous. How can you demonize this guy?" But the guy was a rapist and a killer. It's perfect. It seems to me perfectly legitimate if you're going to target an actual rapist or a killer who gets out of jail and you let him out of jail. So I feel like Trump should go after things like that, proving that Kamala is basically a criminal enabler. I think we're definitely in for a few months of just totally over the top, enthusiastic celebrations of her dynamism, her ebullience, her great dance skills, how much fun she is, how she's like the coconut lady because she made this crack about, and it's just, and also the funniest part to me is that she's seen as like the youth candidate. In fact, she's easily old enough to be J.D. Vance's mother. She's like the same age as Rand Paul. Like nobody would talk about Rand Paul as the youth candidate. I mean, she's going to be 60 before the election, which is fine. I'm not making fun of her, but it's a little strange to pretend that she's like, the part of the Pepsi generation. I mean,
this is why they got to lean into the whole Vance as Hobbit thing. Did you guys see the Politico piece where they actually painted a depiction of him as a mix of Gandalf and who is it? Frodo, I guess. Yeah. There is this weird misperception that this will make people mad at him or make people scared of him or not like him. And I wonder actually if they should be more forthright with that aspect of Vance's kind of nerdy Midwestern kid vibe. But it is sort of uncanny, isn't it? That this whole thing is going on while the president is nowhere to be seen. And we have to be talking about Kamala's brat summer, or else we'd be asking questions about whether these are actual deep fakes when he talks to her over the intercom or whatever. Very, very odd.
I've heard on good authority, Spencer, that he's addressing the nation tonight. So how dare you suggest that
I know
weird?
It's by the time this comes out, it's true. We'll all be shamefully discredited for our speculations on this.
I'm wondering if it's going to look like one of those Disney animatronic things, like from the Hall of the President or whatever that exhibit is. I mean, that's another thing that's totally bizarre is the instant Biden supposedly removed himself from the candidacy, it's almost as though, okay, well, we don't have to talk about him anymore.
And did you see the comment out of his office or from his people today, which is that he still thinks his health is fine. He's going to finish his term, and he's not dropping out for health reasons. It's like, okay, so it's being reported by the New York Post that Pelosi went to him with an offer he couldn't refuse. And I remember when we talked about I'll admit that I was wrong. I thought Biden was going to stick it out. But when part of that discussion was the difficulty of the 25th Amendment stuff, but I had forgotten that Pelosi had enabled Congress to initiate it themselves and sign that piece of legislation back in 2020 and insisted it wasn't about Trump. And maybe she was right.
Maybe it wasn't. Maybe, I mean, Pelosi, I wouldn't put that past her. She's a sly operator.
She was getting ahead of the problem that she saw. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. And when that was a real tipping point when she came out and said something like he needs to make his own decision, when he had just said in no uncertain terms that he had made a very definite decision. and yeah, I thought that was like, I heard that reported like in liberal sources as a real knife in the back, because yeah,
it was Pelosi's Michael Corleone moment.
Exactly. Yeah, he needs to make a decision, and then he needs to go fishing out on a boat. Yeah.
I just wanted to say regarding, like, in terms of like the how the press has just launched into attack mode. There was a few days or like a couple of weeks where it was funny because the press didn't know, like, no one was giving them instructions. They didn't know what to write. So you would see things like, oh, Biden is facing a lot of people saying he should step down, and other people. Then they would also write, oh no, he's staying in. He's really committed, because they would be hearing from both sides. And normally they're just like, they're very good at just taking direction.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what to do. So you were actually getting like different voices in the media. And now, then immediately they started like, oh, okay, now we know what to say. Now we know what to say. But I really like that instantly after Kamala sort of took over, they started saying Trump is really regretting his choice of VP now. Vance was a terrible decision, and Trump wants to get rid of him. Now that just seemed like complete nonsense, because I suspect the Trump people must have had an inkling that Kamala would wind up as the nominee. And why are they saying that he should have picked Nikki Haley? I think they're kind of frightened of Vance. I think they're really, by the way, they are really making fun of him like a lot in ways that you would never be able to make fun of a Democrat or a woman. Like, oh, he wears eyeliner.
Oh my gosh.
He's not really a hillbilly. Just all kinds of weird looking.
Here's his stupid Spotify playlist. It's amazing. Yeah. And he, of course, is, it's like open season because he's a straight white man with a beautiful family. But that thing about like getting the memo is really, really interesting. And I agree with you, Seth. I'm sure they knew exactly what they were doing when they picked him. And I'm sure they probably thought it was more likely than not they'd be up against Kamala. I mean, I have a very small conspiracy theory, which is almost too small, trivial to mention. But, Trump came out like 45 minutes to an hour late for his speech at the RNC, which is also true of Biden at his presser after the debate. But we all know why that was. I mean, it was obvious. And he came out and just like Biden came out and just did not mention it. But the whole like climactic moment of the RNC was weirdly delayed to the point that it was kind of past prime time. Like it genuinely seemed like an impromptu 45 minutes. And there's a couple possibilities of what was going on. One, which is that like Melania was fighting with him about whether she was going to show up or not. But I think it was probably they thought that they might get the Biden announcement before they went on. So I suspect that they've been like kind of aware, because it was I think he already had COVID. I mean, he must have known. And the people who really get me are the ones who have all pivoted to Donald Trump is very old. As if anybody is going to see that and think, wow, you're right. This really needs, this was really a problem. It was really both of them that were the issue.
So there's I don't know if you guys probably aren't as immersed in the segment of golf Twitter as I am, but Bryson DeChambeau winner of this year's U.S. Open Championship in dramatic fashion, has been building a growing YouTube empire. It's sort of how a lot of these golfers are building side income. And he played around with Trump, and there's an hour-long video of him playing with Trump. And it turns out Trump, at what is he, 79, is actually a pretty good golfer, as he has said. Certainly looks to me, especially playing from the tees you would play at that age, certainly a single-digit handicap. And he and Bryson has this break 50 challenge. So normally on a normal score for 18 holes is 72. And in golf, for those of you who aren't golfers, you want to get, you play a par 3 and a 3 is a par, but you want to get lower than par if you can. So par 4 or 4 is par. So the point of, on 18 holes, par would be 72. And Bryson has this break 50 challenge. That is, they play a scramble with the two of them, which means you both hit the whole time, but you pick whoever's ball is in the best spot the whole way. So you can really go for low scores because you take the best of both golfers. And Trump had a solo eagle on a short par 4. He hit a driver to like three feet. I mean, from 215 yards, so not a long drive for a younger man, but then drained the putt. Hit a 25-foot birdie putt. So that timing was perfect too. The Trump is old thing. I mean, he plays golf better than 95% of the recreational golfers in America.
Yeah, and you know what? I noticed the Trump campaign is really pushing this kind of trying to humanize Trump a little bit, like doing more, I don't know, candid stuff. You see him laughing, which, I had actually not really seen too many clips of Trump laughing before. And another thing they're pushing very hard the idea that he's a music lover.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that. Yeah. Like he even like he would go to Philip Glass concerts apparently. And he has this thing where in one of his books, he talks about seeing Toots and the Maytals and really enjoying them. It's kind of interesting to see how they're kind of repackaging him a little bit, which I think is perfectly fair. I mean,
yeah.
You don't want to have him strictly as like the, I don't know, the aloof billionaire type guy. You want to show who he is.
Totally. And this is something that if the Republican establishment had an ounce of smarts, levity, or self-awareness, they would have been doing this for years. I mean, this would have happened like in 2016, because there's actually a very legitimate route into the MAGA world for a lot of guys, especially. And I think this is probably extra true of black men, because there was this whole thing with Trump in early like rap and hip hop culture where he would be a feature. He was like the icon of thug life for a while, and he was like a part, and that's never gone away. Like I was listening to some interview with Mike Tyson, who was saying like he calls it like it is. I like him because he's a man's man. And there's now these baseball players, when they run around the bases, are holding their ears and doing the fight fist from the assassination attempt. So there's like a whole universe now, like a whole manosphere of Trumpery that you could really tap into. You have to then figure out like how to win women, but that's sort of interesting.
Baseball players,
it has nothing to do with his politics, but
baseball players and golfers are all like legendarily conservative, even if they don't. But you know what? The fact that Bryson DeChambeau is, because for the last 8 years, very few people would come out and say, I support Trump. It was just a no-no.
Exactly.
But now I think something's changed, and you're seeing, these, Elon Musk is now a Trump supporter. You're seeing all kinds of, other
Mark
tech
Zuckerberg.
Even Mark Zuckerberg had nice things to say about him. But, it used to be people would launch a huge call up the golfers' sponsors and say, we're going to, not buy Cadillacs anymore. But I think something has changed in that regard, that it's now no longer a taboo to support the Republican candidate.
Yeah. If anyone, did I mention this last week? I can't remember if I did, but the Free Press sent a reporter out to the RNC to interview black voters for Trump, or black delegate members for Trump, or just people around the RNC who were And it was an interesting mishmash of like black guys who'd been college Republicans and, you know, sounded sort of a little dorkier. And then there was one guy who was part of he was wearing a shirt that said ex-cons for Trump. And it came up 3 different times, the ex-con for Trump, and then 2 of the more sort of, you know, longer time Republicans. The black men, they especially 2 of them were interviewed separately. I want to suspect it sounded, you know, they had all this background noise. So he was clearly walking around the convention. And they both said, hearkening back to the 90s hip hop culture, you know, Trump is a boss. That's why we like him. And they use the exact same phrase. So, yeah.
Yeah. Fran Lebowitz said that Trump is a poor person's idea of a rich person, which she meant as an insult. But I think it's one of his greatest assets. I mean, he does exactly what you would do with his wealth if you had it, or if, you know, what some guy like in a trailer park would do if he had $1 bajillion. He'd get a gold toilet, and like that stuff just transcends.
Right. She's like just a total snob. Fran Lebowitz,
exactly. She was
snob. Yeah,
exactly. She was just revealing her bottomless contempt for regular people.
Yes,
it made her look terrible, but it made him look good. And that stuff goes so much deeper than race. It goes deeper than politics. Like, people don't, you know, care like we do about tax policy or whatever. Like, there's something much more primal in that appeal, which if you're too precious to win on that stuff, then you don't deserve to win.
Well, let's get ourselves to discuss a little bit the veepstakes for Kamala. Again, we still assuming she's going to be the nominee. It certainly looks that way. And I just want to read 3 paragraphs from the Financial Times yesterday. Headline of the story: Shapiro, Kelly, and Cooper, front runners to be Harris's running mate, say donors. Pennsylvania's Josh Shapiro, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, and Roy Cooper of North Carolina are the front runners to become Kamala Harris's running mate, according to Democratic mega donors close to the vice president. The 3 men had won backing from leading Wall Street and Hollywood donors and were now being vetted by Barack Obama's former Attorney General Eric Holder, said the People. Wall Street supporters favor Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro or North Carolina Governor Cooper, while Hollywood Democratic donors are pushing for Kelly, said People familiar with the process. Other names further down the list include Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. So this is our democracy in action, is it not?
Sure. Why not? Yeah. I mean, I have no idea what to make of this, and I'm confused about whether it matters. Maybe it does. People are now saying, I just saw like Axios, I think, maybe reporting that Buttigieg is in the running. They're taking a look at him. I'm rooting for him because I've noticed that my one proprietary conspiracy theory is catching on around the internet. I've told you guys this. In fact, Roundtable is one of the first places I ever aired my conviction that Pete Buttigieg is a heterosexual man and that he's just pretending to be gay for political clout. But you saw Tucker Carlson's producer, who is himself gay, just said the exact same thing. Fisher King, a big Twitter account, said the same thing. You know, this is really catching on. It's a lot of people are saying, you guys, and it now I feel this is my moment to really don the tinfoil hat. And all I can say is I really, really hope Kamala picks Buttigieg for that exact reason. I have nothing else to say about this.
I think one of the main like points of evidence in favor of that is it's the idea that he came out as a gay man in 2015.
Exactly.
Like, you know, okay, 7 years into the Obama administration. I mean, was it really like, were things so bad for gay people up till that point that you couldn't come out until like, you know, I mean, it seemed a little late.
He needed some brand differentiation. So that was
this is core to my thesis, Ryan, is that like I was at Yale with all of these Buttigieg types, these carbon copies. I mean, he went to Harvard, I guess, but they all look the same, they all act the same, and they would all chew through your spine if you were standing between them and power, which means that they'll be anything they're supposed to be. But for up until exactly that moment, what they were supposed to be was JFK lookalikes, totally inoffensive, content-free white males with no distinguishing characteristics. And they were supposed to maintain vociferously that they desired no power. They never admitted any ambition. They wouldn't even tell you what kind of sandwich they wanted. But secretly, they were always maneuvering to become president of the United States. That's who Buttigieg is. Right around 2015, at exactly that moment, not only did it become sort of chic to be gay, it became politically expedient or even necessary no longer to be the JFK type. Like the portcullis just slammed down on that person's route to power and authority. And you had to tick some box. And what box is Buttigieg going to pick? Not the black box. You can't be transracial. We know that from Dolezal and all the other cases. You can be trans.
The Maltese vote.
Yes, exactly. you can be trans, but then you have to like really commit to the bit. You know, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. But man, like every politician ever has lied about his sex life. Why should Pete Buttigieg be like Jason? The other part of this is that nobody in his life, especially no gay man, has ever thought to himself, Jason Buttigieg is the guy that I want to sleep with. So it's obviously a beard. I just feel like it all fits together. Wake up, sheeple!
Well,
anyway, that's all I have to say about veepstakes.
I'm sort of, I mean, I know everybody's talking about Shapiro, but I still think Mark Kelly is the guy.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason is, and I know this sounds like a little like dark and deep, but I think they want to bring out Gabby Gifford on stage at the DNC, like Mark Kelly's wife, when they talk about gun control and hate. And they want to bring her out to talk about getting, and here's the point, because she was a congresswoman who was almost killed with a shot to the head. They want to bring her out to kind of say, see, here's someone who was really shot in the head. And
wow.
Trump, in a sense, has like stolen valor. Like he only almost got shot in the head. This is what it really means to get shot in the head, and kind of implicitly put forward the kind of stinking thought that like it was fake, that Trump wasn't really almost assassinated, that he set this up to get like a fake, and also it plays into the old draft dodger stuff they would keep up. And then Mark Kelly, of course, is also like an astronaut, and he, you know, from Arizona, although his whole appeal has always seemed extremely weak. But I don't know. That's my little theory. I'd be curious.
That's a great. That would be very smart of them. That would be really smart, because they must be so infuriated that Trump is now the most high-profile example of a victim of political violence in the United States, because they've got this whole routine about how, yes, partisan politics has become very ugly, and yes, the rhetoric, the tone, etc. But it's really the ones who get violent are the skinheads. These are the basement dwelling. It's all the violence is on the right, and they always trot out like a couple of Charlottesville. There's like a few kind of archetypal examples they use for this, and that all of that is just totally wiped off the board now by the fact that Trump is the most obvious case for sort of accusing somebody of being too violent about politics. So yeah, they do need to neutralize that somehow, and if they can do it via the VP route, maybe that would be smart.
And trotting out Gabby Gifford is sort of stock and trade for Mark Kelly, especially if you talk to Arizonans. The International Woman of Mystery, Lucretia, on the Powerline podcast, 3 Whiskey Happy Hour, she's an Arizonan and was talking about how her opinion of him and the way he does that often is kind of grotesque. So I don't know. That's an interesting theory, Seth. I hadn't thought about it, but it would make sense, I guess, from a certain comms perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we're winding down towards the end of our time, so we should wrap with the obligatory read the damn site section. So I'll start with you, Spencer. What are you reading at the American Mind right now?
Okay, terrific. So I think this might be just outside of our week.
That's okay.
Limitation. Thank you. There's so much that's happened, and I feel like we've missed a couple. So I don't want to let this one slip. I always think Kyle Scheidler is such a value add to any publication he graces or any conversation. But he's got this piece, FBI, which is about the failures in sort of Secret Service response to the Trump assassination attempt. And Kyle's just the guy to bring the receipts. There's obviously still a lot of unanswered questions here, but he picks up a theme that Angela Codavilla and others have sort of raised in our pages, that the default position for many conservatives, many more conventional conservatives, is that to extol the Secret Service and the CIA and the FBI, sort of along with the police and the firefighters, is like the example of American power par excellence. And Kyle just writes, we may never get answers regarding the shooter's intentions and access because the lead agency responsible for investigating, the FBI, is utterly unreliable and aggressively politicized with a decade-long track record of deliberately obfuscating the motivations for terror attacks from all manner of threats, both foreign and domestic. It's really a scathing piece, and it bears sober consideration because this is a place where our instincts are going to be, the rights instincts are going to be to defend the official establishment power, but they've really screwed the pooch on this one. And Scheidler's arguing it's not, it's sort of an anomaly or a mistake.
Yeah, Kyle's always a great read. I recommend everyone to go back to his archives at the American Mind. He has this beat thoroughly covered. A longtime analyst of the interaction between domestic terrorism and the bureaucracies that cover it. So he's shifted. His first beat was Islamic jihadis and terrorists, and he's now doing a lot more work on Antifa and the kind of street left. So he knows a lot of the FBI's reputation for being corrupt and anti-American in many ways. In some ways, is well earned or well deserved. Seth, what are you reading?
Well, one of the reasons I really like working at the American Mind is that we do try to platform or give a platform to young writers, to young conservative writers who sometimes have like an interesting point. Here we ran a piece by a guy. He's an undergraduate at Catholic University. His name's William Benson, and he wrote kind of a fun piece called "The Home Depot Lady Must Be Canceled." Referencing this, I guess some clerk at Home Depot praised the attempted assassination of Trump and was kind of like, too bad they missed or whatever. And I guess she got fired. And then a lot of people on the right said, well, look, we don't want to we don't want to be part of like this thing where people get canceled for saying their opinions. And she's just a clerk. She's just a low wage worker. And William Benson's point is like, well, how do you expect to win a war if you're not going to like get a clerk fired? Now that's a little harsh maybe, but he kind of has a point, which is that the right never wants to do what the left does. Like the left has no problem getting people fired of all stripes, not just fired, but like destroyed. And we're not going to win like this Cold War we're in if we're not going to, take a hard hand sometimes. I mean, do I think that this woman should lose her livelihood? Well, I mean, not really, but you don't get to pick the war you're in. But,
don't hate the player, hate the game.
I guess so. Anyway, the Home Depot lady must be canceled. William Benson.
My choice is Carson Holloway's Democrats Flunk Democracy. Carson, it sort of dovetails with my opening quotes in the veepstakes section from the Financial Times, and I'll just read one of his paragraphs, which is, this is not just a Republican taunt. That is, this is anti-democratic, this process we've witnessed over the last few weeks, but a serious problem and a grave omen for the future of American democracy. The effort to force Biden aside is a precedent for future elections. If it can be justified now, it can be justified repeatedly. It's now established that the primary results can be voided if the poll numbers of the elected nominee are not sufficiently robust by the beginning of July. Primary voters' choice will turn out to be a mere suggestion, reversible by party insiders, depending on their own political judgment. This is not democracy. And, we've, I think, in some ways defended the smoke-filled rooms way of doing democracy of the past, or at least the previous era of strong parties picking candidates. And since the 70s, we've been in this new system where the states vote in primaries and the electors follow the popular will of their state, the plurality decision of their state, usually a majority of their state rather than a plurality. And so if that's the system we're in, Carson's right. It is hypocritical and just so transparently corrupt what we've witnessed over the last few weeks. And it looks like from the Biden team's comments that I mentioned that he's going to come out tonight, I suspect, and say, my health is fine. He probably won't say I had to do it because I can't win, because that would be quite an admission, or a humiliating admission on his side. But it's basically implicitly, it seems to be the spin coming out of the Biden camp, so as to avoid the admission that they were strong-armed into it by party insiders and Pelosi. So it's interesting. It's a short piece. Carson offers us a chance to reflect on this what should be, he suggests, a troubling trend. So go check out Democrats Flunk Democracy. Well, with that, we've hit our hour, so we got to wrap up. Thank you all for listening to another edition of the Roundtable. If you want to learn more about our work, go to our various websites, americanmind.org, ClaremontReviewBooks.com. If you'd like to support our work, go to claremont.org/donate, and be sure and check out all the interesting work done out of our Washington, D.C. office at dc.claremont.org. And please rate the show well, spread it amongst your friends. And as always, thanks for listening. Talk to you next week.
I'm like almost done with the Shogun book. It's so good, you guys.
Yeah.
It's like,
is it really?
It's every page.
It's awesome.
Shocking.
With James
awesome.
Clavell?
Yeah.
Have you
It's
read?
like, you're not gonna it's not gonna like blow your socks off in terms of its literary qualities.
No.
It's
I mean,
really
that's
entertaining.
fine.
Yeah.
The smaller Clavell Japanese book that I enjoyed, it's not the epic of Shogun, is King Rat, about a POW king.
King Rat is the only James Clavell I've read. I love that. It was awesome.
Yeah.